In this episode, I take the X Pro 3 to the streets, try not to come off as a complete creep, and sniff leather. Let's get it started. Good morning everyone and welcome back. Gadget here, and I want to talk to you about my street photography settings with my X Pro 3. I should say that a lot of this is applicable to just about any camera on the market, so it's not exclusive to the X Pro 3, but this is the one that I've been using the most lately and I'm going to be using for this video. Before I get started, I want to let you know that about 80% of you watching are not subscribed right now, and no, I don't take that personally. I just want to use this as an opportunity to let you know that if you're into gear reviews that are a little bit more authentic and real world based, if you're into behind the scenes of photo shoots, if you're into workflows and how I actually craft the images that I make, you'd probably want to be subscribed to the channel, and in fact turn on notifications so you know when a new episode comes out. We're trending about an episode a week and it's always fresh and it always seems to be topical, at least from my perspective. You guys let me know in the comments though. Alright, the truth about street photography settings is that there is no one size fits all. Yes, I pretty much invalidated my entire video, but hear me out. You hear a lot of these settings and it seems to be all geared around being fast, being speedy. And yes, that's useful, but that is not the end all be all. Remember, when you're looking to capture great images in the street, discreetly, please do consider your style and what you're trying to capture and really the environment that you're in. First, let's talk about aperture and depth of field. If you want a singular subject to be in focus, it's gonna require a lot more work. It's gonna be trickier. You're gonna be working with a much tighter zone to get that image that you're looking for. So if you're going f6 or narrower than that, keep in mind that your focusing ability needs to be top notch. Just remember that you don't always have to be at 8 to 16. This is a personal choice. There is no right or wrong way here. I just want to let you know that before we get into the thick of it. Now when it comes to shutter speed, a lot of people will tell you to keep that high, and keeping it high is great because you really get to freeze the motion. But I will also say that you don't always have to. Okay, it's okay to go below 1/250th of a second. Use that to your advantage. Explore that creatively and see if you can create something that adds a little bit more mystique, a little bit more of a dreamy effect to your street photography. It is possible, so don't make this one of those rules that you're unwilling to break. Now let's talk about focus. Manual focus versus autofocus. I will say this, manual focus is incredibly useful because not only will you get better at gauging distances, but it will allow for a more accurate image more often than not once you're good at this. At the beginning, it can be pretty rough. But that being said, it will reward you much later down the line if you start practicing now and getting comfortable with it now. However, you don't have to do this every single time. Autofocus is not a sin, and especially on cameras like the X Pro 3 and other cameras available on the market, there's really great autofocus systems out there, even with face and eye detection. So use those to your advantage where you need to. If you feel uncomfortable with manual focus or you find it difficult to gauge distances, it's okay to turn that tracking on and get the image that you're looking for. Don't feel like you're less of a street photographer because you're using autofocus, because that's simply not the case. So all of that was a bit of a precursor. Let me talk to you about my settings. When I am in an environment where it's well lit, plenty of sunlight coming through, I will go between f8 and f16, somewhere in between there, depending on the available light. If I'm looking at my ISO settings, I'm comfortable with the camera making that decision for me. So I let my X Pro 3 go into an auto setting. Depending on the environment I'm in, the range may go between 160-800, 160-1600, or 160-6400. I don't usually play above 6400 ISO, but I'm very comfortable in the camera deciding what ISO to be at when I am in the streets or traveling. In speedy environments, I keep the shutter speed over 1/250th of a second. I try not to go below that. And if I can get away with it, I try to get to that 1/1000th of a second to really freeze the motion. However, this is not a rule that I'm not willing to break. In certain environments, especially when the sun goes down, I try to get that shutter speed really, really low and find subjects that I can shoot and capture an image that I'm looking for. It's not impossible. So again, do not be afraid to break this rule. And who calls it a rule? It's not a rule, it's just a thing. Just It's okay. It's okay to bring your shutter speed down. Don't worry, you'll be fine. With respect to focus, I find myself using manual focus more often than not, especially when you have peaking functionality on a camera like this. I turn the peaking on, turn it to yellow, and you can see what's there. I play again in that f8 to f16 range and try to gauge the distance. I'm using the Minicon 35mm f0.95 lens, and as you can see, should be able to see that there. It has a distance scale on it. So I've been getting better at it. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm an expert here, but I'm getting better at gauging the distance. So when you use manual focus and when you challenge yourself, you'll get pretty good very quickly at gauging whether a subject is 1, 2, 3 meters away. And when you have that latitude because of that f8 to f16, you have a zone for yourself, and that'll create enough latitude for you to get a pretty sharp image. So it's not just a subject that's at 3 meters, it'll give you a buffer of 2.5 to about 4-ish that'll be in focus, which is great when you're tracking moving subjects and trying to be discreet with your imagery. And this is what people refer to as zone focusing. You're using the depth of field advantage here because of that narrow aperture to create a range, a zone, I guess is the right terminology, for you to focus in. And from that, you're gauging the distance with manual focusing. You're looking at your subject, is that 1 meter, is that 2 meters, is that 3 meters, moving your hands, getting that focus in range, and then snapping the shutter. Again, peaking does make this quite a bit easier, but you can even get to a point where you don't need the peaking, where you're just going off the distance scale. With modern digital cameras, I should also say it's okay if you underexpose your image by a half a stop to a stop, maybe even 2 stops. You can really pull out a lot of details in your post-processing. So don't be bummed out if your images look too dark in the camera. You can take those raw files back to your iPad or to your Mac and really pull out a good amount of detail, even though it may appear like you've lost it in camera. This is also another reason why I recommend using the histogram. Don't live and die by the histogram. It's that little grid, if you don't know, that shows you that curve. It doesn't have to be a perfect curve every single time. Just keep an eye on what information is being lost. If you look at that curve and it's shifted too far to the right, wait, this is a mirror, so shifted too far this way, it means you're losing a lot of highlight information. Things are getting blown out into the white. If it's shifted too far to the left or in this direction, you're losing a lot of shadow detail. So again, you don't have to live and die by the histogram, but use it to your advantage. And also that if it's shifted a little bit to the left, it's not a deal breaker of a solution. You don't want to be clipping so much of it, but that little bit of shift is not going to break your image either. And just to touch on autofocus again, I'm trying to use it a little bit more, but in my eyes, it always feels like a little bit of a gamble. So I will say use it so you can grab the images you like to capture, but use manual focus where you can, because you really are developing a valuable skill there for photography, especially with gauging distances. However, in situations where my subject is not moving so much, I will just turn on face detection. And if you've seen my X Pro 3 shortcuts video, I tell you where I have that mapped to. I flick on that face detection or eye detection to get the image that I'm looking for. Because again, sometimes it's just easier that way. So there you have it, quick recap. Most of the time I'm using manual focus, but not living and dying on that hill. Most of the time I am using auto ISO. I'm letting the camera make that decision for me because I don't want to have to think about that. The shutter speed, I keep it above 1/250th of a second, but for creative reasons, I may bring that down. And again, another hill I will not die on. It all depends on the environment I find myself in. And lastly, I'm gonna use the histogram to my advantage. I'm gonna preserve as much of the highlights as I can, shift that curve a little bit to the left because I know that I can recover a good amount of information there in post. Not always, but most of the time. Once again, my name's Gadgen. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I do read all the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you know when a new video comes out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.